Testing. Testing. Is that better? Good. Buongiorno. You know Italian. Good morning. So I'm Bill Jepson. I'm your guide today. I've been doing a few of these travel logs. And I spent a few times, I went 4 times to Italy, partly because I was in this, I'm a high school teacher in Eden Prairie, and I started this program, overseas program, where we went to Europe about 6 times or so, and 3 times we went to Italy. We also went to China and different places, but really fun to take students, high school students overseas. And then my family went over there one time also in 2005. But in 1975, I lived in Athens, Greece for 4 months on a semester program. And afterwards, for 2 months, I went through Europe and spent a couple weeks in Italy at that time. You see me on the left here with the beard in Piazza Navona. Looked a little different than I did in 2003 with our group in Pompeii. And I taught world history, advanced placement, comparative politics, and lots of social studies courses back then. So this is our itinerary today. We're going to start in Venice and then go over to the lake region, Lake Como, and then Milan. And I did this program, this presentation a couple years ago, and I decided to add a couple things like these beautiful towns of Portofino and Cinque Terre, 5 villages on the coast there. And then we go to Pisa, Florence, and Tuscany, and down to Rome. And then my favorite place that I always recommend is the Bay of Naples. If you have 3 days, you stay in Sorrento like our family did. And on one day you go to Pompeii, the next day you go to Capri, and then the 3rd day you hire a driver and go down the coast of Amalfi to Positano. So we're going to see all that. And let's start our journey in Venice. So Venice is in the northeast corner of Italy on the Adriatic Sea. You take a train along this causeway, this skinny causeway, to the main boat station. And you can see how unique Venice is. It's the water city with 170 canals and islands. And when you get off the boat, it's fun to fly directly into Venice. By the way, it takes about 12 hours and costs about $600 these days if you book it out many months. And if you book in the middle of the week, like a Wednesday. But if you land right in Venice, like we did, and then within an hour, you take that train to the Vaporetto, they're called. They're kind of a bus on water. And then you start floating down the canal, and it's a really exhilarating experience. With now everybody speaking Italian, all the signs are in Italian, and the sound of boat engines and horns. And as you go down the Grand Canal, it's quite a culture shock because you pass these ornate 1,000-year-old buildings as you cruise down the Grand Canal. And you spent your whole life in America. Think about it, nothing's older than 200 years old. And all of a sudden, 1,000 years old. And then when we get to Rome, it'll be 2,000 years old and everything in between. So that's part of the excitement of going to Italy. And Venice is called Venezia in Italian. And these are a couple of my old photographs from 1975, Kodachrome. Back when you would take one photograph every hour or two, and you'd save your Kodachrome slide film. And now, in more recent times when you go there, you're clicking away with your iPhone, and you come home with 2,000 pictures a day. But back then, on the right here, you can see Venezia, Maggio 14th, 1975. It's a convention nationale for cacciatori, which I don't really know what it is. And then the gondola on the right. And it's such an interesting city because for every kind of truck that we have, they have, or every vehicle, they have a boat for it. So what do you think the boat is in the upper left? It's a hearse. And then the bottom right, to the right, is a cement mixer with the gondola. My old photograph. I'm going to mix in other photographs just to get the best ones in case I don't have it. But here's the Rialto Bridge. And this bridge is built in 1591 over the Grand Canal. It's wide enough to have many shops on it, so it's a popular place to meet and take pictures. And of course, when you're in Venice, you want to take a gondola ride. Today it costs about 100 euros per gondola with up to 5 passengers. So that's the whole group. You can have 5 people splitting it for 20 bucks each. And a euro is about 1.1, so it's about $110 for 100 euros. The gondolier will take you on a 30-minute ride through the narrow canals and under many of the ancient bridges. And for a tip, you can have them sing Santa Lucia, Rosso lo mio, as you're going down slowly, past some of the sites like Marco Polo's house before he left on his 20-year adventure in China in 1280. He's from Venice. And one of the main sites is Piazza San Marzo, the big plaza of St. Mark. And at one end is the San Marzo Basilica, very ornate, with gilded frescoes and all these towers. And next to it is the Campanile, the bell tower, which is it has 323 steps. You can take an elevator to the top if you want. And you really know you're in Italy now when you're feeding the pigeons and you hear the bells gong every hour. And it's really exciting. Unfortunately, because of global warming, about 100 days every winter now, it's flooded, as you can see on the right. And this is the Doge Palace, also called the Palazzo Ducale, Duke's Palace. And it's the seat of the prosperous Venetian Republic, which for 1,000 years was down in the Mediterranean. And there's a prison across from the courthouses in there. And when the prisoners would get condemned, they'd go across this bridge of sighs, it's known as. You see all the tourists taking pictures. And that's because they would, if they're condemned to death, that they would look out these windows on their way to the prison, and that was the last sight they would see of the outside world. So now let's go about 3 hours west to Lake Como. There's a number of lakes, Gorda and others, coming out of the Alps in Switzerland, just north of there. And so these were wonderful villas of the emperors back in the day. And still today now that's celebrities and rich and famous, like this is Bellagio. And around farther down the lake is George Clooney's villa, for example. And this villa on the left you might have seen in Star Wars and James Bond's Casino Royale. They had some scenes there. So it's just a beautiful lake. And a little story here, this train engineer, or we call it the ticket master, I had a little incident there because I was on my way back to Rome because I had taken my students from Rome to Florence to Paris, and the other teacher brought them home. But I had to make it back to Rome to meet my family who had never been to Italy before. And in this conductor, he said, sorry, the train is full. And the reason was interesting because it was March of 2005, in the last week that the Pope, John Paul II, everybody in Italy thought that perhaps this was his last Easter Mass. So they were all on their way to Rome, or to Vatican City. And so he said, no, you have to get up. And I would have stranded my family. And I'm like, what do I do? And I kind of pulled him off to the side. All the Italians are looking at me, the only guy who's not Italian. And I put a little 20 euro out, and I kind of just show it to him. And he just quietly takes it, next, and he just kind of let me stay on the train. So just a little lesson. So if you want to grease the palms, you can get your way sometimes. So that was very fortunate. So now let's move on to Milan, which is the financial and fashion capital of Italy. Here is the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele with its high glass roof. It has several luxury retailers offering jewelry, haute couture, and art among the bars and cafes. And it's famous for this magnificent Gothic cathedral, the Duomo di Milano. It's the second largest in Italy after St. Peter's in the Vatican, which we'll see later. And it has 135 spires. After 600 years of construction, it was finally finished in 1965. And the other thing to see in Milan is, of course, the Leonardo's Last Supper, which is painted on this wall of the convent of Santa Maria del Grazie. And for 15 euros, you can see it with a small group for 15 minutes, because they want to make sure that it lasts for another 500 years. Then, as we continue now down to the sea, to the Mediterranean Sea, we spend a day in the stunning harbor of Portofino, lined with multicolored buildings and filled with boats. It's found on more postcards than any other bay in Italy. The rich and famous make Portofino a regular stop. You probably see their yachts anchored there. Beautiful little bay. You see it right here. And then we continue down. And actually, I didn't get to stop here. We went by on a train with our students because we were on our way. We were kind of late to get to Paris, and Nice and Paris. But I wanted to highlight this because it's on so many people's itineraries. And these, Cinque Terre, Cinque means 5. So there's 5 villages along here that are really beautiful. And you can hike between all of them. It takes about 6 hours or so, but a lot of people spend a whole week going from town to town. And from the north going south, the first one is Monte Rosa, and that's the only one with a beach here in the upper right. And then Vernazza is widely regarded as one of the most beautiful towns in Italy. Here it is in the day and in nighttime on the bottom, Vernazza. Then the next one is Corniglia up here, and it's the only one that's not really on the water. It's up a little bit, but beautiful pastel painted buildings and cobblestone streets. And then Manarola on the bottom here is probably the most iconic view of Cinque Terre, seen on many travel calendars. Here it is in the day and the night, Manarola. And then Rio Maggiore is the largest of the towns in Cinque Terre. Brightly colored dwellings with green shuttered windows are a symbol of the Italian Riviera. And it's usually chosen as a home base if you're going there because it has the most hotels and accessible location. So a little farther down the coast is, trying to get this mic right, is Pisa, Italy, which everybody's heard of because of the leaning tower. And it's on the Arno River, which goes up into Tuscany and through the town of Florence, which we'll look at in detail next. But if you get off the train over here, you take this long walk, And here you can see it sticking up as the, it's called the Campo de Miracoli, the Field of Miracles. And it includes a basilica and a baptistry, and then of course the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And if you can climb up the tower, it's a little bit scary, but for 18 euros you can go up that way. And the building dates from 1100 AD, in fact all three of them. And so here's my photograph in 2001 and 2003. And you can see the angle of it. It's at a 4-degree angle off the center. Here's my students at Corsia. I tell them, okay, lean to the left, the same angle for the group shot. And you can see a couple wires here that they were for 10 years, they reinforced underneath this side, and then they pulled it, kind of held it back with the other. And so they can do it without wires now, but anyway, that was how they were working on that. And of course, everybody has to do their creative selfie with the tower for Instagram or Facebook, the young people having fun with that. So now on to many people's favorite, Florence, Italy, on the Arno River, the magnificent city, which is the quintessential Renaissance city. Renaissance means rebirth, and here it is in the 1500s at its height. It was generating a worldwide rebirth of science and art, and on the right is the quintessential Renaissance man, Leonardo da Vinci, inventor, artist, and scientist. On this map you can see the popular places on a typical itinerary. Usually you start here at Academy and the David by Michelangelo, we'll look at that. And then you go over to the Duomo, Cathedral, and the Baptistry. And in the center square is Piazza Signore. And then over here is Ponte Vecchio, and the Uffizi Gallery here is the most magnificent museum. But the Ponte Vecchio is the bridge over to the Bibli Gardens. So you can walk around all this a couple days. You can see it pretty thoroughly, 3 days really. So much to see, but of course on the top of everybody's list is the David by Michelangelo. He was only 29 when he carved this masterpiece in 1504. And he's staring at Goliath as he's about to hurl a stone at him. It was chiseled out of one 18-foot tall piece of marble that his contemporaries said was too imperfect for him to carve. There's no way he can do it. And when you look up close, his huge head here, the hair and eyes and veins in his neck and hands. On the right is the statue of Michelangelo. And I had to stand in line. I got there at 4 a.m. because I had my 8 students here. And I knew the line was going to be big this one year, and so fortunately I was with the first 10 people at 4 a.m. and then when the doors opened at 8, we were first to go through, and it only takes 1 hour or less, even half an hour to see it. But we were done by 9 a.m. Excuse me. And we come out and here's 4 or 5 blocks long line, and they weren't going to get in until noon or so. So that's the way to do it, get up at 4 in the morning. And just as this awe-inspiring to me is these statues of the slaves by Michelangelo on the same hall as you go down to the David. And you really see what a creative genius he was as you look at the chisel marks, you know, with it half done. And you just see that magnificent arm, muscular arm coming out of the rock, coming alive. It's really amazing. Later we'll see the Pieta in the Vatican. his other famous statue, and the frescoes, of course, on the Sistine Chapel. Quite the genius. So, and then a few blocks away is the Duomo, beautiful Gothic cathedral, fourth largest in the world, called the Cattedrale di Santa Maria del Fiore, which means the Cathedral of St. Mary of the Flowers. And this photo I took looking up at sunset, you really see the intricate statuary up there. Built in 1436 after 140 years of toil. And on the right is the Campanile, which means bell tower. And this intricate facade was painted with pastel colors that have kind of faded over the 6 centuries. But there's 12 large statues high above, with famous Italians like Galileo and Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. And the fun thing to do is to take a circular stairway around the inside of the Duomo up to the top, the cupola. And here you can look down upon the red roofs of Florence, or Firenze, they call it Firenze, F-I-R-E-N-Z-E. And here you can look down on the Campanile and the baptistry next to it. This is a 1975 photo I took looking towards the Arno River going through in the Piazza Signoria, the main square. And here is the baptistry next to the Duomo. And this is famous for, it's an octagon, but on one of the 8 octagonal sides is the gilded doors, which were carved by Ghiberti in 1452. And art historians have praised it for its compelling portrayal of the scenes from the Old Testament. And gilded, that's just the close-up of one of these. It's really amazing. And then a couple blocks away is the Medici Chapels, which contain the tombs of the Medici banking family, who were the benefactors of the great Renaissance artists such as Michelangelo, Raphael, Donatello, and Da Vinci. And it has these beautiful marble statues showing this one, showing Medici looking down on dawn and dusk. They're called these two metaphorical statues in marble. And then, yeah, and here, this is 2003, with my students at the Piazza di Santa Croce. This church is where a lot of the famous artists are buried. And on the left here is a statue to Dante Alighieri, who is entombed there. He wrote the Divine Comedy, of course, and it's a great place to just relax. We spent some time there watching kids play soccer and getting a gelato ice cream cone. Inside, here's Galileo's grave, the great scientist and astronomer. There's a statue of him. And then this is Machiavelli, the father of modern political science, famous for his immoral advice about how to rule ruthlessly in the book The Prince, Machiavelli. And then here is the Palazzo Vecchio, the old palace in the Piazza dei Signori, the main square of Florence. This is 1,000 years old, and it's where the Medicis ruled as citizens and not monarchs, due to their wealth owning the largest bank in Europe in the 16th century. And by the palace entrance, you can see a statue to Hercules, and then a copy of the David, which the real one, like we said, is in the Academy 10 blocks away. And it's a great place to meet, or perhaps take a carriage ride around the town, enjoying the statues. Here's another one of Neptune, the god of the sea, and a fountain. And here's my students having a dinner there. There's restaurants everywhere, and of course, great Italian food. And right there in the square. Here's Neptune again. But this one is Perseus beheading Medusa by Cellini. And in 1975, I stood down here underneath and then looked up at the tower. Got this artistic shot. But, wow, again for 20 years old. And that's right here, towards the entrance. And you can see another one here is famous, the Rape of the Sabines. And next door to this square is the Uffizi Gallery, which is world famous for having the most valuable Renaissance collection of art in the world. Some of the examples are, you've seen this, The Birth of Venus by Sandro Botticelli, and also his Rite of Spring. They're as big as this screen is in the museum. And this is by Leonardo da Vinci, the Virgin Mary. He, of course, also did the Mona Lisa, but that's in Paris, in the Louvre. And then the Sleeping Ariadne. So you could spend hours and hours in the Uffizi Gallery. But make sure you get tickets ahead of time. That was one thing we goofed on and had to wait 3-4 hours with all these students in a long line going up and down here to the entrance. And so, depending on the time of year, if you're in the middle of winter, you can just walk right in. But starting in spring and definitely in the summer, you need to have tickets ahead of time. And there's lots of artists around who are happy to sell their wares here. A lot of art schools. What a great place to go to college and learn about art in Florence. And and then here's my students. Right next to the gallery is the Arno River. And in the distance here is the Ponte Vecchio, the famous old bridge built in 1345. It has a number of gold jewelry shops on it as you walk across to the Bibli Gardens on the other side. And during World War II, it was the only bridge across the Arno that the fleeing Germans did not destroy. Interesting. So, here's the last slide of Florence. From Piazza Michelangelo across the river, you can get this great view. So now let's head through Tuscany on the train, or perhaps you want to drive, rent a car down to Rome. It takes about 3 hours if you kind of go directly. But you can also stop at some of the beautiful famous towns like Siena on the left. It's famous for the Palio. Every July and August they have these competitive horse races that they're all betting on each other's families. It's quite the exciting event. And next to the tower, this is the tower over the piazza. And then, speaking of towers, this other town, San Gimignano, has 12 huge towers, hundreds of feet tall. They were kind of competing 700-800 years ago to which prince could have the tallest tower. And so that's Tuscany. Now we're down to Rome. Let's take a tour of the capital city of Italy. Here we are on day one in 2003 with my students in front of the Arch of Constantine and the Colosseum. Here, instead of buildings being 500 years old, now we're 2,000 years old. So it really takes a while to get used to it because it's just so amazing. And remember, the Roman Empire lasted for 1,000 years. We've only been around, 300. But 1,000 years from 500 BC, roughly before Christ, and 500 years after Christ. And so they conquered all of Europe, pretty much from England down to North Africa and the Holy Land. And so, and here's a tourist map. You can see the Tiber River goes through, Tiber is the river that goes through Rome. And it shows some of the ancient sites where we'll go, like Circus Maximus next to the palace. of the emperors overlooking the Forum and the Colosseum on the right. And then we'll go around in there. You can walk around Rome for 3 days and see most of the famous things. But you know, people spend weeks there too and can't see everything. But 3 days will do it pretty well. This is, of course, the Colosseum, also called the Flavian Amphitheater, built in 80 AD. It held 70,000 people, about the same as our U.S. Bank Stadium. And the ruins, you can see that half of the outside wall is gone. Over the centuries, a lot of the marble was carted off to build other buildings and churches. But you take an elevator right here up to the top floor, and you can look down on it. Here's a painting. The gladiators, of course, were in here fighting, and here's a famous painting of the emperor giving a thumbs down for him to kill his victim. One of thousands of spectacles held here for more than 300 years, from 80 AD to the end of the Roman Empire in around 476 AD, where animals and prisoners were put to death for entertainment. And in this illustration, you can see there was actually a kind of a sunshade that would be pulled even farther out into the middle on hot sunny days. But here's what it looks like today. My students looking down. You can walk across. They put kind of a walkway so that you can look down on the cells where they would hold the tigers and lions who would come up out of the middle when there was a fight going on, like here with Russell Crowe in the Gladiator movie was really great. By the way, there's a new Gladiator movie almost done this summer. That's going to be a sequel to it. And but you can see how it looks from the inside. And then on the outside here, we were attacked by these play-acting gladiators. They want €1 if you take some pictures. So that was kind of fun. But this is the Arch of Constantine, and you should all know that in 312 AD, Constantine the Great, famously, he was about to go into battle with Maxentius, and he looked in the sky and saw a cross in the clouds, which told him he would win the battle, and he did win the battle. So because of that, he decided to make Christianity legal throughout the whole Roman Empire. So that was the point, really, that Europe became, and our ancestors became Christian. Because before that, for hundreds of years, I'm sure you've heard that they would crucify and martyr the Christians, when they were illegal. And this cross is here prominently in the Colosseum, because every year the Pope has a ceremony for the Christian martyrs who died in the Colosseum, like it's showing here. And they would last all day from the morning until sundown. Just literally thousands of people and animals killed. It was really, today what we have left is football games, and baseball games. It's much tamer and more civilized, of course. And here's what it looked like back in the day. A good illustration of the Forum. The Forum is next door, and you go through this arch called the Arch of Titus, which was erected in 80 AD to commemorate the destruction of Jerusalem by the Roman army. If you look closer, you can see Senatus at the top, Republicus, the Senate, the Republic, and that's the beginning of our traditions in the Congress, for example. And when you go through it, you can, my family, we went up on the palace overlooking it, and you can look down, and that's a great view to see all these buildings, the baths, the Temple of Jupiter, and this is the Curia, where their Congress, their Senate, would would make decisions, not the final decision, that was the emperors would always just make the final decision. And this is the temple of, an interesting temple from 140 AD because it has a church inside it, which was built in 700 AD. And because of the church, it's the most well-preserved of all the ruins. Most of them were destroyed by the barbarians in 476 or the late 400s, and they just totally knocked down everything. Here's the main walkway, my students going down there, and a view in this great painting that shows what it was like back in the day on the right. And it spans so much time. The earliest of the temples, this is what's left of the Temple of Saturn, is from 498 BC, 500 years before Christ. And then next to it is 200 AD, the Septimus Severus. And then the Catholic Church is so young right here, it's only 500 years old. And so it's really kind of mind-boggling. Then a short walk away is the Circus Maximus, or what's left of it. You'll remember in the movie Ben-Hur, here's Charlton Heston as he went around here. 150,000 spectators, more than twice the Colosseum, would watch these spectacles, especially the races. And here's what it looks like today. It's just a green park that everybody walks around. This is the palace where the emperor would look down upon it. And these are my boys flexing their muscles. You can kind of see it in this painting, the way it looked back in the day. And now, another few blocks away is the Church of San Pietro, where Michelangelo's amazing 8-foot tall marble statue of Moses from the year 1515. He's holding the tablets here. And then next to that, or not far from that, is the Boca Veritas, the mouth of truth, where tradition has that you put, there's a long line of people who want to put their hand in there, in his mouth, and supposedly whatever you're thinking will come true. You probably remember the great movie Roman Holiday with Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn, and he puts his hand in there and pretends that it's bitten off with his sleeve. It scares her for a little bit. Great movie if you haven't seen it lately. Trajan's Market and Column is not far away. It's 125 feet tall, with St. Peter now on the top, replacing the original Emperor Trajan. And the column commemorates historic battles, and the storyboard frieze around it. So if you follow this around and around to the top, it tells the story of all these battles that are pretty much long forgotten now. And this is this huge building that sticks out. It looks more modern because it's 1861. It's a monument to Vittorio Emanuele, honoring the king who had unified Italy. And the Italians don't like it. They call it the wedding cake, because it looks like a big wedding cake sticking up over the Forum and all these ancient ruins. They thought he had kind of a big ego. He built this great monument to himself. And so, then next to that is the Piazza di Campidoglio, where the Capitoline museums are. And as you walk up there, you see these great statues of Castor and Pollux. And then this square overlooking the Forum has a 12-star pattern on it. You can kind of see, which was designed by Michelangelo. He was everywhere. And here are my boys looking over the piazza. In the center is a statue, to Marcus Aurelius. And here's, in that museum, is, for 100 years, they've had these old pieces of Constantine the Great, this colossal statue to the emperor who Christianized Europe. And that's all there was until this year. In fact, just a month ago, they finally finished this reconstruction with bronze garments. And they studied it all with computers and used some of the old pieces, but it shows how big this statue was sitting in the Forum at 1,500 years ago. And so that's kind of exciting new thing for the Romans. And then the typical thing to do is this long walk on the second day. You start at the Piazza dei Popolo, and which is on the outer walls, and it's called the People's Square. In the center is a 1300 BC Egyptian obelisk, which was brought to Rome by the first emperor, Octavian. And that's right up here. And now we're going to go to the Spanish Steps, and then the Trevi Fountain, and then the Pantheon and Casa Navona. This is a typical walk that usually, even if you have one day, you go here and the Colosseum and the Vatican, which is almost impossible to do in one day. But you begin your this walk at the Spanish Steps here, and the steps go up to the Trinity de Monte Church at the top. There's a lot of famous scenes like Roman Holiday, The Talented Mr. Ripley with Matt Damon and Kate Blanchett. But it's a great place to meet and just kind of start your journey through the city. Or our hotel was pretty close to there, so my boys and I went up there in the night, and there were all these Romans singing Beatles songs or all these songs with guitars, and it was really fun to just sit there and watch them on the Spanish Steps. And a few blocks away on your walk is the famous Trevi Fountain, which you've seen in many movies as well. It's a Baroque statue of Neptune, the god of the sea, and the sound of water rushing out from it. Built in 1762 over this ancient aqueduct at the intersection of three streets. That's why Trevi means three. And the tradition is to throw coins into the fountain. Here's my students, over your shoulder. The belief is that if you throw a coin over your shoulder and make a wish, you'll return to the eternal city someday. And I did it 4 times and I returned 4 times. So it must be true. Or you do 2 coins and you will fall in love, 3 coins and you will marry and return to Rome. And more than $1 million are collected every year from the fountain and donated to charity appropriately. And of course, all around there are these gelato shops where you can, gelato is their famous ice cream, which is so good, much better than our ice cream. And of course, ice cream was invented by the emperors. They had slaves go up into the Alps and bring back snow in a covered wagon, and then they would make the ice cream out of it. And this is kind of interesting. It looks like pizza, and that's what it is. It's not round. And in Italy, it's baked in square pans. It makes so much sense. You just say, I want this square or that square, according to the size. You pay by the weight. And so here the E, it says down here, 1.75 euros. E stands for euros, and about 11 euros to $10. So about $2 for 100 grams of pizza. And just to show you the numbers here, they're very similar to Spanish. Of course, the Latin languages are Spanish, French, and Italian. And so their numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's fun to learn the numbers and a few Italian phrases like buongiorno, buonasera, good morning and good night. Here's the Pantheon, my favorite. This building is just unbelievable. And it stands for, Pan means all, so and Theon is God. So it was built to all the gods in 14 AD by Marcus Agrippa, you can see up here. And the reason it's so well preserved is because it's the Catholic Church again since the 7th century. And it's really a rotunda which has influenced so many buildings around the world, including our Congress Capitol building and the Jefferson Memorial. Anywhere there's a rotunda, this was the first one, and here it is still in great shape. It has a hole or oculus in the top, and so if it's raining or snowing, sometimes, rarely, but if it's raining, you can stand in the center of this marble, in the center of the marble church, and the rain comes down and goes through a drain in the floor. That's kind of unique. But many of the famous Romans were buried, interred here. And there's huge doors that you go through. But it's just a beautiful building in a nice little square with fountains around it. And then about 5 blocks away is the Piazza Navona. And this is where Emperor, it looks like a stadium perhaps, and that's true. Emperor Domitian had an oval racetrack here. You kind of can see the shape on the right. And there's 3 spectacular Baroque fountains in it since the 1700s. Here's my picture of them in 1975. It's a great place to just relax and have a glass of wine at one of the cafes and listen to the street musicians, or have your portrait taken like this young lady. And here's the central fountain. It's called the Four Rivers Fountain. And you might have seen it in the movie Angels and Demons. It's where Tom Hanks finds the murdered cardinal in there. And here's my family, the 3 sons, in front of it. So that's Piazza Navona, and then just a few blocks away, this is a nice walk that is so convenient in order on your way to the Vatican that everybody does it. So this is the Bridge of Angels, the Angel Bridge over the Tiber River. Features 12 impressive marble statues of angels leading to Castel Sant'Angelo on the other side. There's many street vendors there when we were there from North Africa. But these statues are just unbelievable. The St. Angelo was originally built for Emperor Hadrian around 130 AD, and then later converted to a fortress, and then a prison, and then a papal residence where the pontiff would take refuge when there was a siege on Rome, which happened a number of times, so they'd have to hide in there. So there's the Angel Bridge in Castel St. Cloud. In fact, we've walked all across here, and now we're going to go to the Vatican. Vatican City is a separate entity apart from Rome. It has its own stamps and laws. And of course, in this map you can see St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican Museums, and the Sistine Chapel is right here, we're going to see. So when you walk up to it, the first day you see St. Peter's huge statue on the left, finished in 1626, and the whole basilica was finished then after 150 years of building, and designs, of course, by Michelangelo again, and also Bernini. It's the most renowned work of Renaissance architecture, and it's, of course, the largest church in the world. And as you enter, you hear the echoes of conversations bouncing off the 440-foot-high ceiling and the inlaid marble floor. The gigantic bronze altar is 128 feet tall, where the Pope gives his Mass. The Basilica is the burial site of St. Peter, chief among Jesus' apostles, and the first bishop of Rome. His tomb is directly below the altar, where he was crucified upside down by Emperor Nero. in 64 AD, when it was illegal. So, and as you walk in, you see this list here of the 266 popes leading up to Pope Francis today, who was appointed in 2013. And there's 91 popes buried here. You can go underneath the altar, there's all these rooms underneath where you can see the tombs. On the right, though, as you walk in, is Michelangelo's famous Pieta, the Pity, which he carved out of marble in 1499 at the age of 24 years old. Can you say genius? And it's the only one, interestingly, that has his name that he signed. He signed Mary's sash because everybody was saying they couldn't believe that he made it at such a young age, so he carved Michelangelo. Yes, they did. And this is the only photograph I have in 1975. That was Pope Paul VI. And it was very crowded, and I just held my old camera up over my head. It's kind of blurry. But it was pretty amazing to see that. And then in 2005, like I was saying, we were there for Easter week when Pope John Paul II gave his last Mass. And usually in the second window, you look up on the right, and it's always in the second window from the top that he comes out, or any Pope comes out and gives the Mass. And it was an interesting week because we're there with our family on Sunday for that, and then 4 days later we're in Pompeii on Thursday, and the bells start ringing while we're in the amphitheater. And I looked at my sons and let's count at the top of every hour how many times, and it was 84 times. Of course, for each year of his life, he was 84 years old. So he had died, sure enough, 4 days after the Mass in 2005. And then, of course, Pope Benedict then came in after that. So for many weeks, the cardinals arrived from around the world to choose a new pope.
White smoke is the election.
Oh, yes, you're right. Yeah, so and that's Anne back there. She tells me she's been there many times. And in fact, tell us, you witnessed it one time?
So 11 years ago today, I happened to be in Rome that week, and Pope Benedict had resigned several weeks before, and we stopped down. So there was no pope when we got to Rome. They hadn't elected. So we saw black smoke come out twice, just happened to be going by for the election. And then on March 13th, it was pouring rain, and about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, we happened to walk over to the square and standing in the rain, wondering what was going to happen today, and all of a sudden white smoke came out of it.
Yeah, white smoke, sorry, I had it wrong.
So in about an hour later, Pope Francis comes out on the balcony at St. Peter, and he says, "Pray for me." And we have a new pope, and so the crowd just goes mad.
This is a great experience there.
11 years ago.
And it's exciting next year as another Jubilee year. Every 25 years since the year 1300, the Pope holds a special year where Catholics can absolve their sins. There's many events in Vatican City for the whole year. And on the right here, the Swiss Guards, who have their funny uniforms, but they protect the Pope and the cardinals. And here I am in St. Peter's. This shows the Vatican museums, which you walk down these long halls, and then you get to the end. This little building here is where the Sistine Chapel is on that ceiling. So we'll take a look at that here. But as you go down these halls that are resplendent with tapestries and paintings and sculptures, like this one I really think is the most amazing, statue of Laocoon and his son. Because of these serpents, how do you carve that out of marble? Just a writhing serpent. And at the end is a door, and you walk in, and there's the Sistine Chapel. Here's the Pope Francis with the cardinals. And on the ceiling, of course, is Michelangelo Buonarroti's painting. The ceiling, he painted it in 1512, and later in 1541 he painted the Last Judgment. Now, you're not supposed to take pictures there. One of my students told me afterwards, I snuck a picture, and so I kind of had to reprimand him, but at least we got a picture. And then now, of course, they have these great pictures of much better quality. And this shows the Last Judgment, which he did later in his life. And of course, it's Jesus in the middle with all the saints and angels on the right, with the cross on his right, over here with the cross at the top. And they're all ascending to heaven. And on the left, his left, is the pagan temple column, and underneath it all the sinners and devils, sending them down to hell. So, and notice how clear and bright it is, and that's in comparison to my 1975 picture on the right. I took one picture by putting the camera on the floor and hitting it. And it's so dark because of 500 years of soot with candles and everything. So ending in, it took 14 years, but ending in 1994, they fastidiously cleaned the whole thing very well. And he quickly painted you actually take a piece of paper and you put little dots in it to outline what you're going to draw. And then from that, in the wet plaster, it has to be wet. So then you have to quickly paint this within a few hours before the plaster dries. And that's why a fresco lasts 500 years with the color, because it's painted into the plaster. And so, quite amazing, all the stories in order of the Old Testament. Here's Adam receiving life from God, and Adam and Eve being banished from the Garden of Eden. And here's the St. Peter's on our last night. You can kind of see it at night when nobody's there. And one other thing, interesting tour, is the spooky catacombs underneath Rome, where the Christians escaped persecution in the 3rd century. You can walk through miles of eerie underground cemeteries with tombs and skulls. So that's kind of weird. So now let's go to the Bay of Naples, which I always recommend, favorite place to spend 3 days. You stay in Sorrento. You usually don't go to Naples. It's kind of a lawless, crazy, very Italian. The tourists don't really go there, and it's the locals. But it's a big city, and interestingly, it's 5 million people next to the volcano, which blew in 79 AD and covered Pompeii with 20 feet of ash. Back when Pompeii only had 5,000 people and lost a few thousand of them. And but they say this will blow every once in a while, and I forget how many years, but it's kind of due every 2,000 years, I think. Yeah. So that was 79 AD. It's almost 2,000 years from now. And if that goes now, it's going to be a horrible tragedy, because they have plans, but okay, everybody get in your car right now and leave at the same time. It's going to be crazy. So, but if you have 3 days, you go to Pompeii, then to Capri, this island on the bottom, and then along the coast to Positano and Amalfi. So let's start in Pompeii. On August 24th, 79 AD, that volcano blew, and everybody, students in the Basilica, which is the courthouse. And this was an amazing thing because it preserved this town in time, unlike almost no other place on earth. The tile roofs collapsed. It started at noon, and by dinner time, all the roofs had collapsed. The walls stayed intact, but it was just like a very heavy snowfall, only with volcanic ash at 100 degrees, and gases which killed most of the people. Of course, there's many books and movies about it. Here's a map of it. You see how close it is. So we're going to take a look at some of the things here, the Forum, the baths, and the theaters, and the amphitheater, the big Colosseum. And here's the Temple of Jupiter today, and then how it looked back before that day. And you can see this used to be a point, this Mount Vesuvius, but all that blew up. And so, and this is the iconic statue of Apollo, the god of the sun, and the way the temple looked back in the day to honor him. And what's especially interesting about Pompeii is the estimated 2,000 people who died there. They couldn't escape. They were asphyxiated by the gases, covered in ash, but it preserved their bodily position at the moment of their death. And they really didn't start digging it up with scientists until the 1800s. And so here's the famous crouched man. He said, "Oh my God, what's happening?" A total surprise to them, of course. Although there had been earthquakes, some bad ones, and a bad one just a couple of years before that, so they kind of had a little warning, but they didn't know anything about science and volcanology. And this is a close-up. They have a few of them on the right here. You can take pictures through the glass. You can see his skull and his teeth. They say this is a slave because of, you can see their clothing sometimes, and this is the belt of a slave. And on the bottom right, you can see that animals, dogs and pigs and horses, were caught in the fall as well. But no cats. It's interesting. Lots of dogs, but the cats got away somehow. They're pretty smart. And it's interesting how they do that. There's 1,200 plaster casts, so they figured out 200 years ago that when they dig down and they through the 20 feet of ash, like the height of this, and they get to a cavity, and they reach in there and they find the jewelry, maybe bracelets and rings on their skeletons. And they take those out, and then they decided they'd fill it, like the bottom right, fill it with plaster, and then we have a permanent plaster cast showing what position they were in at the time of their death. Which is a little creepy, but it's interesting to see a time stopped so many years ago. And here is, you can walk around the ruins today for about $18 a day. My two sons are standing here. They would wash the sewage down the streets here, although they had some sewage pipes and things. But it's interesting to see these ruts here. Those are from a few hundred years of carts, maybe with iron wheels on the wooden wheels, the iron clad. And so they would wear away the rocks, and it's just interesting to see the passage of time there. And this taverna here was where they would sell fish and hot bread, and this loaf of bread has been on the counter for 1,900 years. I think it's a little stale by now. And here's a bakery. You can see how the slaves were used to go walk in a circle to grind the flour to make the bread in the oven here. So we learn a lot about their ancient methods. And then you can walk through the Forum baths. It's interesting, there are words for it. The hot caldarium sauna, and then you go to the tepidarium pool, and then you go to the frigidarium, which is the cold pool. And we should have more of those today, I think, because they really must have been really relaxing. And then the frescoes on the walls of the wealthy Pompeians, this one especially in the Villa of Mysteries here shows an initiation rite for the cult of Dionysus, but this is the most well-preserved one. It goes farther around to the right too. And because they were buried without oxygen for, and anything to rot them over 1,800 years. They are really well preserved. And there's mosaics of tiles. They had a lot of those. There's a huge one, bigger than our screen here, of Alexander the Great, which is famous from the House of Fawn. And then this is funny, it says Cave Canem, that means beware of the dog. And at the entrance to one of the villas. And there's all these fountains around, and a lot of dogs running around, by the way. So my son in front of one of the public fountains, so they could get their water from that. They were also, because the Roman Navy would come down from Rome to Pompeii to party, I guess is the word, there were 20 bordellos like this one around there. And then they had these public bathrooms, which kind of strange to us today, but that's what they look like. And you can kind of see, here's another map. Well, now we're going to go to the theaters and the amphitheater. You can kind of see the outline of Pompeii. Just a small town, remember. And there's 2 outdoor theaters, a large one that held 4,000 people, and then the smaller Odeon with a roof. The Odeon was stone with this roof and held about 2,000 people. Here's the view from the cheap seats on the right. And also is a palaestra for gladiator training. This scene from Spartacus shows them in training for the future battles in the arena. Because now you go down the street and there's this huge amphitheater, and this is actually older than the Colosseum. It's 80 BC, whereas the Colosseum is 80 AD. And so it held 20,000 people cheering on the gladiators. And it famously, in 1971, Pink Floyd, the rock band, did a whole movie in here where they set up the rock instruments and played there. But this is what it looks like from the gladiators' view looking up. Most of the seats are preserved. There's my 3 sons in it, and they had fun running around through the tunnel. You just kind of have free reign wherever you want. For $18, you can go all over Pompeii. And then we'll stay in Sorrento. There's Pompeii, and then here's how close Sorrento is. And we're going to go to Capri and Amalfi, and we'll be done. Getting close here. Here's a fisherman with his nets. He's mending a sardine net because we went in 2005 and stayed right here in this town called Marina Grande, which is connected to Sorrento on water. For about €100 per night in March of 2005, we stayed in this hotel here. And they have all these wonderful shops and the lemons, all the fruit grows to huge sizes, and the wine is especially good because the volcanic ash has, its chemicals in there. The plants really like that. So look at the size of that lemon that my son is holding. And what a beautiful little harbor here in Marina Grande, Sorrento. There's lots more of those here. As you go, you take a hydrofoil for only 10 minutes or so over to the island of Capri. And this is a beautiful little town the harbor town on this island, which here's some colorful fishing boats on the pier. There was a movie with Clark Gable and Sophia Loren. It happened in Naples, I think is the name of it, from the 1950s. It's all filmed right here on this harbor. And this is the main town clock tower and some of the shops. It's known for its lemon perfume and limoncello aperitif made out of lemons. It's delicious liquor. Another thing you can do is go to the Blue Grotto, this little tour where you take a boat and go into these caves which have this ethereal blue color. You can even jump in and swim inside. So it's a thing for the tourists to do. But it's famous mainly for the fact that the Emperor of Rome, Tiberius, lived here for 20 years. During the time that Jesus was crucified, he was the emperor at that time, 44 AD. And he also had Caligula, Emperor Caligula on there. And if he was displeased with any of the slaves, he would throw them off the cliff. There's famously. These rocks are called Faraglioni. They're where the luxurious yachts from around the world anchor. This is a map of Capri. So we were in this little town, and then the yachts and the celebrities all hang out on this side of the island. But one thing to do is to take this bus up from the harbor up to Mount Solaro, like my students and my kids did. It was one of the funnest things. It's windy road up there. And when you get to the top, there's a ski lift. And you're about 40 feet apart, so you can talk to each other as you go up. It's a summertime ski lift. And it goes over these wonderful little gardens of the Italians with all their little sculptures and shells and things. When you get to the top of Mount Solaro, you have this wonderful view of Mount Vesuvius and Amalfi Coast in the distance, and the rest of the island down there. And you can hike down to it for an hour or so if you like. But that's the island of Capri, with all a famous or popular stop for people in their yachts. And now the last thing we'll do is go down. We were on the dock in Capri, and my wife started talking to this gentleman who said, "Yeah, I'll take you on tomorrow for 150 euro." We decided on 150 bucks. We'd go down the coast with the three boys in the back, and her, by the way. So we were pretty squished in his little car. But this is the most amazing drive, very famous around the world because of its winding roads that along the cliffs and the beautiful villages and beaches. You can see in this aerial how it just is really kind of treacherous. You need an Italian driving because sometimes you're in a traffic stop. And here is one of the first towns along the seaside cliffs. Motorcyclists love it because of the hairpin turns and picturesque villages. And you get to Positano, which is the most famous town, and a lot of movies were filmed here as well. It's now a tourist neck, kind of crowded actually. You might want to consider other villages if you don't want the crowds, especially in the summer. But here's a sunset view from a veranda, so it has these great restaurants and hotels right on the hill that you can rent. This is my photograph looking up at it. And also, this fisherman is sanding his boat before applying fresh coat of paint on the right. And as you continue down past Positano to these other towns, Fiore is really beautiful, but it's tiny. It's really just a beach. And then Atrani has these arches above the beach. And then you get to Amalfi, which has a long history as a powerful commercial center for merchants in the Mediterranean 1,000 years ago. Amalfi, there's pictures of the church, and they were kind of reconstructing, repairing the church. There's the stairway going up to it on the right, the Amalfi Basilica. And there's the last picture. Arrivederci, Amalfi Coast. And that's what it looks like at night. It's beautiful. And so, arrivederci, Italia. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any questions? or anything you'd like to share? How many of you have been to Italy? Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah, I hope you all can go.
What's the best time of year?
The best time is, they call it the shoulders. In other words, not June, July, and August. You want to go in May and April's a little cold, or September and October's a little cold. So September and May are ideal. And then you get better prices and half as many people. By July, it's really crazy because all the Europeans go, that's their Florida. It's, if you're from France or England, you get a month off in August and you all go to Italy. Any other questions? Anything you want to share? Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Oh, by the way, my next one is in July. We want to do it just before the Paris Olympics. So look for it in July. We'll go to Paris and we'll see everything in Paris. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so there's the lake region where I showed you Lake Como, but there's about 5 or 10 more. There are all these huge, long, skinny lakes coming out of the Alps, and they're fresh water. Yeah, you can fish in there. Oh, hi. I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Yeah.